Thomas Reynolds was the trusted uncle everyone admired. Emily Reynolds was the bright young niece with dreams of escape. But behind closed doors, their secret affair spiraled into a deadly obsession, one that ended in a brutal murder no one saw coming. The town of Willow Creek was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's name. It was quiet and calm, surrounded by dense forests and winding country roads. Life moved slowly here, and people took pride in their tight-knit community. In this town, the Reynolds family was well known and respected. Thomas Reynolds was one of the town's favorite men, a hard-working mechanic who owned the local garage. He was seen as friendly, dependable, and protective of his family. Thomas had always been especially close to his niece, Emily. Emily Reynolds was 22 years old, full of life and promise. She had just finished her second year at the nearby college, majoring in art. Her bright smile and friendly nature made her popular among classmates and friends alike. She often came home on weekends to visit her Uncle Thomas and her parents, who lived just a few blocks away. To the outside world, their relationship was that of a caring uncle and a beloved niece. Everyone assumed they were just family, sharing holidays and birthdays with laughter and warmth. But beneath this peaceful exterior, something darker was taking root. What no one in Willow Creek suspected was that Thomas and Emily's relationship was far from normal. Over the past several months, their bond had shifted into something secretive and dangerous. Behind closed doors, a complicated and forbidden affair was unfolding, one that they desperately tried to hide from the world. At first, it had started subtly. Thomas, who was usually quiet and reserved, began spending more time with Emily. They would have long conversations late into the night, sharing personal stories and dreams. Emily, who had always looked up to her uncle, found comfort in his attention. She was going through a tough time adjusting to college life, and Thomas was there to support her. But the lines between family and something else slowly blurred. Thomas began to cross boundaries that should never have been crossed. The uncle who once seemed protective now acted possessive. He monitored Emily's activities and questioned her about her friends and whereabouts. Emily found herself trapped in a confusing mix of admiration, fear, and guilt. She didn't know how to escape this situation or who to trust. Friends noticed the changes in Emily but could not understand what was wrong. She stopped attending social events and spent most of her time at home or with Thomas. Her bright personality faded, replaced by nervousness and secrecy. People whispered, wondering what had happened to the cheerful young woman they once knew. Thomas, meanwhile, maintained his friendly public image. He helped neighbors with their cars, volunteered at the community center, and smiled warmly at anyone who crossed his path. No one suspected the dark secret he kept hidden. He was a man living two lives, one as a trusted member of the town, and another as someone caught in a dangerous and forbidden relationship with his niece. As weeks turned into months, the tension between Thomas and Emily grew. The secret affair was like a fragile thread, ready to snap at any moment. Both knew the consequences if anyone found out. Families would be torn apart. Lives could be ruined. The fear of discovery haunted every conversation and every stolen glance. Emily began to plan how to break free. She wanted her old life back, the freedom to study, to see friends, to dream without fear. But Thomas would not let go easily. His behavior became unpredictable and controlling. Small arguments escalated into threats, and moments of tenderness twisted into manipulation. The town of Willow Creek remained unaware of the storm brewing within the Reynolds family. Neighbors continued to greet Thomas with smiles and waves. Friends of Emily still reached out, hoping she would come back to them. But beneath the surface, the once simple bond between uncle and niece had turned into something deadly. One chilly autumn afternoon, Emily disappeared. She left the house without telling anyone where she was going. Her phone was switched off, and calls from worried family members went unanswered. Panic spread quickly through the Reynolds household. Her parents contacted the police and the entire town joined the search. Thomas acted devastated, his grief on full display. But inside, fear gnawed at him. The secret they shared was now at risk of being uncovered. The hidden affair, the controlling behavior, the quiet threats, they could all come to light if Emily was found and spoke out. As the hours passed, questions arose. Had Emily run away? Was she in danger? Could Thomas have had a role in her disappearance? The police began to look more closely at the uncle, piecing together messages and clues that painted a disturbing picture. What had seemed like a simple family crisis was becoming something much darker. The town held its breath, waiting for answers. Willow Creek, once a peaceful place, was now the setting of a mystery that would shatter its calm forever. The story of Thomas and Emily was only beginning, and what was hidden in the shadows would soon be revealed. The days after Emily's disappearance were filled with fear and confusion. The town of Willow Creek, usually so calm and predictable, became a place of whispers and suspicion. Search parties combed the woods and fields surrounding the town, hoping for any sign of Emily. Flyers with her picture were posted on every telephone pole and store window. Friends and family clung to hope, but as hours turned into days, hope began to fade. Detectives working the case started digging into Emily's last known movements. They interviewed friends, teachers, and neighbors, trying to piece together where she had been and who she might have been with. The more they learned, the more they realized something wasn't right. The story Thomas Reynolds told was full of holes. At first, he said Emily had gone out for a walk and never returned, but later his timeline shifted, and his answers became less clear. Meanwhile, in private, investigators discovered a series of messages on Emily's phone. These messages revealed a troubling relationship, one filled with tension, fear, and control. The conversations between Emily and Thomas were no longer just about family matters. Instead, they were filled with jealousy, anger, and desperate pleas. Emily was trying to break free from something she felt trapped in, but Thomas's responses grew increasingly threatening. One message stood out. Emily wrote that she wanted to leave Willow Creek and start fresh somewhere far away. Thomas replied with words that seemed to warn her not to run or she would regret it. These messages changed everything. Suddenly, the loving uncle image crumbled, replaced by someone dangerous and unstable. Friends of Emily spoke out, describing how she had changed over the past months. Once outgoing and confident, she became quiet and withdrawn. Some said she had confided fears about her uncle, though no one knew the details. Others mentioned seeing Thomas watching Emily closely, his expression darkening whenever she tried to make plans without him. The detectives began to look at Thomas as more than just a concerned family member. They dug into his past, uncovering troubling incidents that had never made the news. There were stories of anger and threats, a sharp temper hidden behind a friendly smile. People who knew him well said he could be controlling, but no one had imagined something this serious. As the investigation deepened, a new discovery shocked everyone. Hidden in Thomas's garage, police found a collection of Emily's belongings, things she had never told her family about losing or leaving behind. Among these items were notes, drawings, and personal letters, some filled with fear and sadness. It was clear Emily had been trying to tell someone about her situation, but she had no one she felt safe confiding in. The tension in the town grew. Some people began to question how well they really knew Thomas Reynolds. The man they had trusted as a helpful neighbor and loving uncle now seemed capable of something terrible. Rumors spread quickly, and neighbors looked at each other with suspicion. During this time, Emily's parents were heartbroken and desperate for answers. They held vigils and pleaded for their daughter to come home safely. But the evidence was mounting against Thomas, and the police grew more convinced that Emily was a victim of foul play. They quietly prepared for what they feared was the worst. Then came a break in the case. A hiker who often walked the woods on the edge of Willow Creek noticed something unusual. Hidden beneath a thick layer of fallen leaves and branches was a small, disturbed patch of earth. The hiker alerted the authorities, who immediately began a search of the area. What they found was horrifying. Emily's body was there, hidden away in a shallow grave. The discovery shattered the town's hope completely. The medical examiners confirmed she had been strangled. This was no accident or disappearance, it was murder. The town mourned deeply, struggling to come to terms with the brutal truth. How could something so dark have been hiding in their peaceful community? How could someone like Thomas Reynolds be responsible for such a terrible crime? Police arrested Thomas and charged him with Emily's murder. The man who once seemed kind and dependable was now accused of the most violent act imaginable. As the trial approached, more secrets about their relationship surfaced. The story of a secret affair turned obsession, control, and finally deadly violence was becoming clear. Detectives learned that Thomas Yes' behavior had grown more erratic in the weeks before Emily's Yes' death. Friends recalled heated arguments and strange sightings of the two together late at night. The evidence suggested that when Emily tried to escape the relationship, Thomas's jealousy and anger exploded into violence. The case revealed a disturbing pattern of manipulation and abuse. Emily had been caught in a nightmare. Trapped by the man who was supposed to protect her, she had tried to break free, but Thomas's hold was too strong. The town of Willow Creek was left grappling with shock and grief. A family torn apart, a young life lost, and a community forever changed. The secrets they never saw coming had brought darkness to their doorstep, turning a quiet town into the scene of a terrible tragedy. The discovery of Emily's body in the woods outside Willow Creek sent shockwaves through the community. The peaceful town was no longer just a quiet backdrop. It had become a scene of tragedy and horror. The small crowd that gathered at the edge of the forest where she was found was heavy with grief and disbelief. People struggled to understand how something so brutal could happen in their town, especially involving a family they thought they knew. For the Reynolds family, the news was a nightmare come true. Emily's parents were shattered, unable to comprehend how their vibrant daughter could be gone. Thomas Reynolds, who had until recently been seen as a devoted uncle, was now the center of suspicion and heartbreak. The man who had claimed to love Emily so much was accused of killing her in a cold, violent act. As the police continued their investigation, evidence began to pile up against Thomas. The crime scene was meticulously examined, and forensic teams worked to find any clue that could reveal what had happened in the final hours of Emily Abbe's life. They discovered traces of a struggle, broken branches, scuffed earth, and marks on nearby trees. These signs suggested that Emily had fought to escape. In addition to the physical evidence, the police uncovered disturbing details about Thomas's behavior leading up to the murder. Neighbors recalled hearing raised voices from his house, sometimes late into the night. Friends of Emily described her growing fear and desperation, noting that she had stopped speaking openly about her uncle's visits. It was clear that something had been very wrong for a long time. One of the most shocking revelations came from a detailed search of Thomas's home. Hidden in a locked drawer, investigators found journals filled with disturbing entries. The writings revealed Thomas's obsession with Emily and his belief that she belonged only to him. He wrote about his fear of losing her and the lengths he would go to keep her close. The journal showed a mind twisted by jealousy and control. The community struggled to reconcile the two sides of Thomas Reynolds. The man who once fixed cars with a smile and helped neighbors now appeared as someone capable of deep darkness. His calm, friendly demeanor was a mask hiding dangerous secrets. As the case moved toward trial, the town's attention turned to the courtroom. Every detail was examined as the prosecution built its case. The story that emerged was one of manipulation, fear, and violence. Thomas's secret affair with Emily, once a whispered rumor, was confirmed. It was clear that the relationship had been toxic from the start, with Thomas exerting control over Emily's life and freedom. The prosecution argued that Thomas's actions were driven by jealousy and desperation. When Emily tried to end the relationship and reclaim her independence, Thomas reacted with violence. His crime was not just a moment of passion, but a calculated act to silence her forever. Throughout the trial, Emily's parents sat in the front row, their faces etched with pain but determined to see justice done. They spoke about their daughter's hopes and dreams, about the bright future that had been stolen from her. The courtroom was filled with a heavy silence as the evidence painted a picture of a young woman trapped in a nightmare. Thomas Reynolds chose not to testify in his defense. His lawyer argued that there was no direct evidence linking him to the murder, and suggested that someone else could have been responsible. But the jury found these claims difficult to believe. The combination of physical evidence, the messages between Thomas and Emily, and his own writings created a compelling case. One of the most emotional moments in the trial came when the lead detective described the scene where Emily was found. The detective spoke about the signs of struggle and the careful effort Thomas had taken to hide her body. This testimony made it clear that the crime was brutal and deliberate. The town of Willow Creek watched closely as the trial unfolded. For many, it was hard to believe that someone they had trusted could be guilty of such a terrible crime. The case forced them to confront uncomfortable truths about secrecy and betrayal in their own community. After days of testimony and evidence, the jury retired to deliberate. The tension was unbearable. Everyone waited anxiously for the verdict. When the jury returned, the foreperson announced a guilty verdict for the charge of murder. Thomas Reynolds was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict brought a sense of relief to some and deep sorrow to others. Emily's family expressed a mixture of grief and closure. They knew nothing could bring her back, but justice had been served. The town of Willow Creek began the slow process of healing, though the wounds left by the tragedy would not easily fade. In the aftermath, the story of Emily and Thomas Reynolds became a cautionary tale about the dangers of secrets and the darkness that can hide behind familiar faces. It reminded everyone that beneath the surface of even the calmest places, there can be pain and danger waiting to be uncovered. The quiet town had lost its innocence, forever changed by the brutal murder that had shattered one family and shaken a whole community. Willow Creek would remember Emily not just as a victim but as a young woman whose life had been stolen by a secret too terrible to keep. As the trial proceeded, the chilling truth about the relationship between Thomas Reynolds and Emily came to light, shocking the entire community. What had once been whispered rumors was now exposed in harsh detail. The secret affair was more than just a scandal. It was a twisted bond filled with obsession, control, and manipulation. The prosecution carefully laid out the timeline, showing how Thomas's feelings for Emily had changed over the years. What began as a protective uncle's care slowly transformed into something dark and dangerous. His obsession grew until it consumed him, blurring the lines between family and something forbidden. Emily, trapped in this web, found herself unable to escape. As evidence mounted, it became clear that Thomas's controlling nature had escalated when Emily started pulling away. She wanted to reclaim her life, to break free from his grasp. She made plans to leave Willow Creek and even considered transferring to a different college. But Thomas's jealousy turned violent. He saw her independence as a threat, something that could expose their secret and ruin him. Several witnesses came forward describing Thomas's behavior in the weeks before Emily's death. Neighbors heard heated arguments coming from his home. Friends recalled Emily's increasing fear and reluctance to meet anyone alone. One close friend revealed that Emily had spoken of feeling trapped, but was too afraid to ask for help openly. Her silence was a reflection of the power Thomas held over her. Financial troubles also surfaced during the investigation. adding another layer to the motive. Thomas's garage had been struggling, and he was under pressure to keep up appearances. Some experts testified that his need to control Emily was tied to a deeper fear of losing everything, including the family reputation he had carefully built. The court was shown messages between Thomas and Emily, filled with desperation, anger, and manipulation. Thomas often demanded to know where Emily was and who she was with. His tone was threatening and possessive, leaving little room for freedom. Emily's replies showed her fear and attempts to calm him, but also her growing resolve to escape. As the prosecution's case unfolded, a disturbing picture emerged of a man who had tried to control every part of Emily's life. He tracked her movements, isolated her from friends, and used guilt and fear to keep her close. This pattern of behavior was a classic example of emotional and psychological abuse. The defense argued that the relationship was consensual and that Thomas was being unfairly blamed. They claimed there was no clear proof he had killed Emily and suggested alternative theories. However, the evidence was overwhelming. The forensic details, the messages, the witness testimonies, all pointed toward Thomas's guilt. One of the most shocking revelations during the trial was the extent of Thomas's planning. The prosecution presented evidence that the murder was not an act of sudden rage but a calculated decision. The way Emily's body was hidden, the attempts to cover up the crime, and the timing all suggested premeditation. Thomas had intended to silence Emily permanently. Psychologists called to testify explained how obsession and control could lead to dangerous behavior. They described how Thomas's jealousy had transformed into a deadly fixation. The control he exercised over Emily was not just emotional, but had escalated to physical violence and threats. The murder was the final and tragic outcome of this toxic relationship. The court also heard about the emotional toll on Emily in her final days. She had been isolated, scared, and desperate. The weight of living in fear of her uncle had taken a severe toll on her mental health. The pain and hopelessness she experienced were clear from her personal notes and conversations recovered by the police. Emily's parents spoke about their heartbreak and the struggle to understand how their family had been torn apart. They expressed sorrow not only for their daughter's loss, but for the years of hidden pain she endured. Their words were a powerful reminder of the devastating effects of abuse and secrecy. The trial lasted several weeks, with each day revealing new details and deepening the tragedy. The town of Willow Creek followed closely, grappling with feelings of shock, betrayal, and sadness. Many wondered how such darkness could exist in their midst without anyone noticing sooner. When it finally came time for closing arguments, the prosecution urged the jury to see the truth behind the lies and deception. They emphasized that justice was necessary to honor Emily's life and to protect others from similar harm. The defense pleaded for doubt, but the overwhelming evidence had already made its mark. The jury's decision was swift and unanimous. Thomas Reynolds was found guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict brought a sense of justice to some, but left a lingering sadness in the hearts of all who knew Emily. The man who had once been trusted was now a symbol of betrayal and tragedy. The judge sentenced Thomas to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. The sentence was a firm statement that such acts of violence and control would not be tolerated. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read, a heavy weight settling over everyone present. In the aftermath of the trial, Willow Creek faced the difficult task of healing. The story of Thomas and Emily Reynolds became a warning about the dangers of obsession and secrecy. It highlighted how abuse can hide in plain sight and the importance of speaking out. Emily's memory lived on through the people she had touched. Friends and family created a foundation in her name to support victims of abuse and raise awareness about emotional control and manipulation. Her story became a catalyst for change, inspiring others to seek help and break free from toxic relationships. The tragedy left a lasting impact on the community. reminding them that darkness can lurk behind familiar faces. Willow Creek was forever changed, its innocence shattered by a secret that ended in brutal murder. But from this sorrow came a renewed commitment to protect the vulnerable and uncover the truth, no matter how painful. After the courtroom delivered its verdict, life in Willow Creek slowly began to adjust to a new reality, one marked by sorrow, but also by a search for healing and justice. Thomas Reynolds was no longer just a man from the neighborhood. He was a convicted murderer, imprisoned for the brutal crime that had shattered a family and stunned a community. The sense of relief was tempered by grief as everyone struggled to come to terms with what had happened. Emily's parents faced the hardest challenge of all, living without their daughter. Their heartbreak was raw and unending. They spoke openly about the pain of losing Emily, not just to death, but to a secret that had poisoned their family from within. Friends and neighbors offered support, but the void left by Emily's absence was something no words could fill. Despite the sorrow, they found strength in knowing justice had been served, and that her story would not be forgotten. The community of Willow Creek came together in ways it never had before. Vigils were held in Emily's memory, and people gathered to share their grief and support one another. The town's quiet streets, once filled with everyday normalcy, now echoed with the pain of loss and the lessons learned from tragedy. For many, the incident became a wake-up call, a reminder that evil can hide in familiar places, and that sometimes the people we trust most can cause the greatest harm. In the months following the trial, Emily's family worked with local organizations to create a foundation in her name. The foundation aimed to help victims of emotional abuse and manipulation, providing resources for those trapped in controlling relationships. Through this work, Emily Mia's parents hoped to bring meaning to her death by preventing others from suffering the same fate. Their efforts brought awareness to a topic often hidden in silence, encouraging others to speak out and seek help. The story of Thomas and Emily Reynolds also sparked important conversations in Willow Creek about the signs of abuse and the dangers of secrecy. Schools and community centers began hosting workshops to educate people about healthy relationships and how to recognize controlling behavior. The town's residents learned to be more vigilant, understanding that love and trust should never come at the cost of safety and freedom. Despite these positive steps, the scars left by the murder ran deep. Families questioned how they could have missed the warning signs. Friends wondered if they could have done more to help Emily. The pain of betrayal lingered, as many struggled to reconcile the friendly neighbor they once knew with the man who committed such a cruel act. This internal conflict was difficult to resolve, but became part of the town's process of healing. Emily's memory was preserved not just through the foundation, but also in the hearts of those who loved her. Stories about her kindness, creativity, and dreams were shared frequently, ensuring she was remembered for who she was, not just as a victim. Her artwork was displayed at local galleries, and scholarships were established to support young artists in her honor. These acts helped keep her spirit alive and offered a way for the community to channel their grief into something hopeful. Meanwhile, Thomas Reynolds's life behind bars was one of isolation and reflection. Stripped of freedom, he faced the consequences of his actions every day. Prison was a far cry from the life he had built in Willow Creek, and the reality of his guilt weighed heavily on him. Though he had once tried to hide his dark secrets, there was no escaping justice now. The trial and its aftermath served as a stark reminder that appearances can be deceiving. The man who had seemed kind and dependable had been hiding a dangerous obsession, a secret that destroyed a young life and left a community forever changed. This truth haunted Willow Creek, but it also brought a resolve to be more aware, more caring, and more protective of those at risk. In the years that followed, Willow Creek slowly regained some of its peace. The forests still whispered with the memories of tragedy, but the town's spirit endured. People learned to value honesty and openness, understanding that silence and secrets can be deadly. Emily's story became part of the town's history, a tragic chapter that shaped its future. For Emily's family, the pain never fully disappeared, but their work to honor her legacy gave them a sense of purpose. They found comfort in knowing that her life, though cut short, had sparked change and helped others find strength. Their hope was that through awareness and compassion, no one else would have to suffer in silence. The tale of the Uncle Ike's secret affair ending in brutal murder was a grim reminder of how love twisted by obsession can destroy everything it touches. But it was also a story of courage, of a community coming together to seek justice, of a family turning grief into action, and of the power of truth to break through darkness. Willow Creek would never forget Emily Reynolds. Her life and death became a powerful lesson, that even in the most familiar places, danger can hide, but with awareness and courage, it can be faced and overcome. The town moved forward, carrying her memory as a beacon of hope and a call to protect those who cannot protect themselves.